Hello, everyone, and welcome to the much anticipated Week in Review with the one and only Doooovid, who will now be leading us in a chant to start off our show.
Hey, thanks a lot. Welcome, everyone. I was thinking the words. This was one of my favorite chants when I was in Brooklyn and served the rabbi I mentioned to last year. It passed away a few weeks ago at 95. And this one was a favorite among kind of like the future rabbis and businessmen. It was a slow one. The words are from Psalm 81. In Hebrew, and it's going to be directly related to, I think, this week's Week in Review. The words are Li Ami Shomea Li. If only my nation would listen to me, Yisrael Bidrachav Yehalechi, and Israel would walk in my ways. Kamatoi Vehem Achnia. My enemies have almost been defeated. V'altzareim Yoshiv Yadi, and I have almost delivered my my people. My hand is almost delivered the pains away from my people, and so it's a nice catchy tune just to set the tune. I think it'll fit for the Week in Review. So Psalm 81, verse 13 and 14, if anyone's familiar. Li Amishoy Meyali Yisrael Bidravachav Yealechi Li Amishoy Meyali Yisrael Bidravachav Yealechi Kemat Toiveyemach Nia Vialtzareyemu Shivyavadi Kemat Toiveyemach Nia Vialtzareyem Yoshivyavadi. Okay, we move into the Week in Review. I thought that especially the words and the tune would be a nice setting for kind of what happened this week, because it's everyone. If only everybody would listen to me and follow in my path, then I would only deliver everyone from the tormentors and relieve them of their pain.
Thanks, Doovid. Yeah, I think it's a great idea to practice these different. I'm not sure what you call them. I guess they're hymns or chants, just sharing, and not just the scripture, but also what it means to us. I've noticed some of the higher performing people, they've turned their gaze away from the fighting and towards scriptural interpretation. And I am so happy to see that progression. Even something like Claire Kaw and John Vance doing a comparative study between Islam and Hinduism, even though there's probably some less than ideal things that got said in that, it's still, I think, a step in the right direction, because we're moving away from interpersonal drama and towards some semblance of a coherent worldview. So yeah, I'd love to hear about your experiences this week. You said earlier that you had a chance to go on 3 streams. If there are any of them you'd like to talk about, I've got some different things to cover. I had you were there. I think I saw you in the comments with the British guy. And
yeah, Brutus the British. Yeah. Hopefully we'll talk about that one at length. And that tune kind of summed up my week and my streaming. I didn't have a chance to do my half Jew stream, just the research. I wanted to be conclusive in it, so I'm trying to research like thousands of years of the history of intermarriage and the different laws and biblical interpretation, the laws of Israel, the emancipation, the creation of civil marriage. So it was just a ton of research, although I think I'm ready now. Maybe hopefully Tuesday I'll do that stream. But I think it was Sunday night I came on the Bab stream. I streamed in real life. I recorded and posted later at the Hare Krishna temple some nice chanting. We had this woman from Austria who led this beautiful kirtan, chanting, like everyone was dancing really into it. I shared that with you on Facebook. And then when I got home, I saw Babs was streaming. I popped on. I had this like 2-hour conversation with Mansoor, and it was kind of interesting. I was talking about we were talking about real estate practices, and I was kind of preaching Doovidism, conservatism, republicanism to Mansoor, and saying like, don't try to assimilate, don't try to blend into American society. He's better off preserving his identity and culture, and that might also improve his business practices. And I was explaining Hasidic real estate practices. I've mentioned to you many times the very wealthy real estate owner Sharf in Brooklyn, who donated over $40 million to the Hasidic cult I'm part of, and he would use kind of these internal. He had moved up to have, I think it was the first in New York that was luxury nursing homes, where just this concept that he made nursing homes, but they were luxury nursing homes, and became quite wealthy from it and donated a lot of money. And I was mentioning how Hasidic kind of like cultist Jewish groups use this internal circles for real estate business and the kind of stuff you can't really teach in university, because a lot of people don't actually have formal educations and just go straight into real estate, but through these like tight network of groups people. And I was explaining to him how Chinese people could have the same strategy, as where he's kind of like an assimilated Chinese and isn't caught up. And then like 2 a.m, like we go on for a few hours and run out of stream, and then 2 a.m, Brundle pops on. And I think Mansoor was like really eager to talk to him, and he's kind of just like in a rage. And I think like Mephistopheles was kind of saying like, really, he's taking like, God forbid, his anger on his wife out on me. And then he's coming up like, oh, but those like strategies that Jews and Chinese use for real estate, whites wouldn't be allowed to do. And I was like, well, actually, whites basically use the same strategy. Just kind of having like a resource base through your community, that most constructions unions are ran through ethnic bases, and somehow it like deteriorated and fell into like name calling and kind of like racism, and so that ended. And then so I just popped off, and I don't know how long his conversation with Mansoor didn't last that long. So then the next day I wake up in the morning, like I was up to like 4 a.m. with that stream. And then I wake up the next morning and OV's got his stream. And I guess, I got up like 9 a.m. And OV is like, Brundle's kind of like bashing me on OV's stream. And so I joined that, and like Faustein's on it. And we had somewhat of an interesting conversation on free speech and ideas, and whether ideas could be dangerous. And that might be worth discussing in terms of the quantum mind when we move to the science section. But like, OV's kind of like, my ideas are dangerous, multiculturalism is a dangerous idea. And I'm like, well, I don't think ideas are dangerous, period. I made the twofold. You're saying my ideas are dangerous, but he thinks his aren't, where he wants to like deport people, and God forbid he's flying like a Nazi flag or whatever. And he's saying his ideas are not dangerous, but mine are. And then we get into this long argument about cognition in the brain that hopefully we'll discuss, of do people really act off of their ideas, or at the end of the day people might have ideas but their action isn't really caused by their ideas. So this, and we could go through like World War II and criminal psychology and different things. And so that might be interesting to discuss, just kind of, is action based off of ideas, or is action based off of different things? With the purpose of that debate was, are ideas dangerous, maybe related to free speech. And then the next day I pop on OVs again, and the conversation basically went nowhere. We weren't able to have a conversation in good faith. We weren't able to like agree on terms. I think he just wanted to like defeat me. And I was like, and then like, I'm trying to leave, and he's like, don't leave. And he's like, well, if you leave, you lose. And I was like, we discussed that last week. What does it mean to lose or win in these debates? But I see that coming to an end. At least my participation in those streams. I think you were also on that stream. And then
to actually quickly mention to people, because it seems like Doovid has kind of become the punching bag for Judaism in a way. So I've noticed a lot of people on streams are kind of like saying, oh, Doovid says this, Doovid says that. And then it's a bit like straw manning, maybe, because they're sort of, they kind of see you as the embodiment of something that they oppose. And for people who are interested in debating Doovid, I know you said it's winding down, but if you ever happen to get dragged into it again, I just want to give that message to people that if this is something you're interested in debating, people like someone like Doovid, I would really look at his channel, because he has a tremendous amount of wisdom, and he's gone to great pains to sharing a lot of ideas. He was gracious enough to host me for a very positive stream on the quantum mind. And when people like, I forget the guy's name, the one who called you Duvnik.
Yeah, that was my last stream. I had a run-in with him on Thursday, although that actually turned out to be kind of positive. But yeah, I mean the OV, I think Norvin had like a 5-hour stream, and like I think people were like bashing me, and I guess he took it down because that's how he does it. But yeah, I mean, just kind of using me as the punching bag for all the problems they have with like the Jews. And yeah, I'm willing to argue multiculturalism and immigration. Those are two issues that I've thought a lot about and think that it's worthy for me to step up and try to defend multiculturalism and immigration. But just like constant debates, like last week we discussed like Daniel in do I want to debate every single person again and again on multiculturalism, immigration, and especially like they haven't done any research. So it's it's really kind of like they just want to use me as a punching bag. Really, they don't want to hear my arguments or listen. They just kind of want to defeat me for so it just seemed kind of pointless. So OV's stream kind of fell into that, where it was just pointless bickering. He wasn't going to do any of the necessary research to take these ideas further. So it was just kind of like, can you trigger me? Can you make me look bad or whatever? So it just doesn't make any sense. I think you're falling to the same thing with Claire, where it's not a conversation in good faith, where there's actually a good exchange of ideas. It's just trying to like beat you for the crowd. But Thursday, this woman, Ash All Day, if you're familiar with her, had a stream with the guy, Kenny Joseph, the new Doovid. And I popped on the stream for a few minutes, and we kind of came to an agreement that even though I disagreed about Jesus, like McKenny's pro-Jesus and Ash All Day's born-again Christian, just got baptized, that generally that these guys are bad influences because they're pushing her in the direction of sin. So even though, like, I think even Mustafli's Bad Goy did a clip of that where I was saying, like, yeah, I reject Jesus. I don't believe in Jesus in that way. However, I do think you'd be better off like not following the path of sin and following the path of righteousness. And when you team up with people who are like, oh, well, Doovid rejects Christ, he's your enemy, is it really beneficial for her to team up with people who are going to push her on the path of sin just because, to make a common enemy out of me? I think Brutus kind of had that, when we get into your talk with him, I watched that where, he's kind of like, we have the common enemy, God forbid the Jews, and he's trying to team up with you to take down the common enemy, where it's like, but do you really have any point of agreements? And even so to some extent, that was a surprise turn, that conversation with Ash, where me and Kenny came to this agreement of not following a life of sin and having a purpose. And today's Easter, and I'm kind of have I like Jesus. I like the teachings of Jesus. I like Easter, even though like I don't believe in Jesus as the idol, as the God, so that I would reject. But I'm very friendly towards the concept of the suffering deity, like I like the legends and the stories. I'm very happy to talk about that in the lessons. Although I make my point like Claire in the agreement that like it's an idol. Idols aren't good. But so my streaming wasn't that eventful this week, and it's likely that I'm not going to be able to work with Brundle. It just kind of showed, just to add on that, like one occurrence with Brundle where he comes on Babs's stream and he's got like this dual dissonance personality, where at the same time Daniel had the same thing where it's like, Doovid, like the Jews are bad and I'm against you. And then at the same time, he's like, well, actually, I'm actually more connected with the Jews than you are. And so, Brundle's pulling up like, Babs got Levi a job. And I'm like, yeah, I don't buy it. Because I was kind of telling like Mansoor, he thinks like he's got to get in good with Babs because he needs investors, or, needs to kind of like kiss the ass of rich people so that they might invest and advance his career. And I was trying to say from a business perspective, unlikely kissing Babs' ass is going to get you anywhere. So Brundle's like, no, Babs got Levi a job. And I'm like, I don't believe it. And then, Brundle goes into this kind of like, I'm actually more connected with the Jews than you. And like, I know who Levi is in real life. Like, I've met him. We're actually friends. And I'm like, what? I mean, it's possible, but it's just like at the same time, he's like coming on like the hardcore anti-Semite. Then at the same time, he's like, I'm in real life friends with Babs and Levi. Like from my channel, I've met and became friends with these Jews, and they don't like you. They like me. And Daniel seemed to have like the same kind of thing to me. So I think this dissonance is just going to become too much for Brundle, where he's on like one stream bashing me and 14, even 88, and then the next day he's like the exact opposite, where he's trying to like social climb within Jewish circles. So
do you want to hear a clip from an appearance he made on the OV stream?
If you want.
Yeah, it didn't go so well.
I don't really need to be next to the, put me on the other side of the fucking wall here, please.
Yo, Blitz, man, you're totally surrounded. You got 3 Jews all around you, man.
This is very disheartening, I must say.
One thing you have to respect about OV is he says he wants to make his channel the Jerry Springer of the far right, or whatever he's calling it, and I would have to say he is succeeding.
I'm not even Jewish. The only 2 with Jewish blood are Aaron and OV, and I guess I'm not sure about Blitz. He's so gung ho about it. He must know something the rest of us don't.
Jesus Christ. You are one sick fucking vampire, dude. You deserve to be ovened.
I don't really want to go past that, but basically it got worse and worse and worse. And I noticed you had mentioned Sinkowitz earlier, and I have to say I absolutely adored listening to you talk to him, because I guess I try to be respectful of people, but I have a hard time with his little idea, and so we kind of got into this big the conversation I had with Claire before I finally had to say that she I wasn't going to talk to her anymore until she agreed to stop with the ad hom, specifically the allegations that I had some sort of mental problem, because it was just starting to be bad optics for me. So this guy's basically just, I don't know why people leave comments this long. Like, I think if you want to leave, if you actually want someone to respond to you meaningfully, you should probably express your point in less than, the length of a novel here. So I guess I'm on Sinkowitz's radar here too, but as you can see, our conversation ended on not so polite terms.
Yeah, I mean, that basically sums up my week. I know you were very active. You look like you stream hours and hours, like especially with Claire again and again. But you were on Dennis Dale. Your conversation with Brutus, you made a whole reply stream, and maybe we could even talk about that one at length. But you had a lot more activity, and I was comparing your kind of like non-stop banter with Claire to as a parallel to me and Brundle, where there was kind of a point to it, but the point may have been reached, and the conversations just hit like a standstill. And
well, in chess, when you get a stalemate, that's what it feels like. It just feels like we're not actually taking any of each other's players. We're just like moving around the board, and it's the game's never concluding. And I guess I went back and watched the original stream that you were actually on. You remember the Adam, I want to say Adam Green, the Indian fellow? He was on that stream as well. That was actually the stream that Claire and I met. And I re-listened to the conversation, and I realized like we haven't really, basically we've been discussing the exact same thing for 4+ months. And so at some stage you kind of have to maybe agree to disagree and realize that the ad homs are kind of, to be so closely associated with someone who has so little regard for respecting you as a person is kind of, I think it's bad optics. It's just sort of saying like, I'm basically willing to be trotted out to be insulted like some kind of dancing bear. And maybe you can kind of relate to that a little bit too. You know, at some point, like, of course you want to defend your traditions, but at some point it just becomes, there's really no argument being made. And I know that they're trying to make an argument now. And like I said, it's a step in the right direction, but at the end of the day, it's hard to see how we're going to agree with each other in any meaningful way.
Yeah, it's not even an agreement. Like I said, it's basically like conflicting like party promoters or people fighting over a tiny audience, like the original blood sports, where you could make a comparison where, like where the alt-right, Andy Worski kind of like took audience away from Sargon through hosting the debate. And then, they got tens of thousands of viewers that switched over to them. And a lot of the alt-right, worked in a similar method where through these debates or blood sports or trolling, they eventually were able to seep audience away from different people to start their own. And, at this point, there's no real gain in audience. So like, okay, with Luke Ford, Luke Ford kind of extracted the audience from, TRS and Andy Worski, JF. And then Brundle extracted an audience from Luke Ford, and I extracted an audience from Luke Ford, and Babs is like the overspill room from Luke Ford, and so on. That these kind of trolling yourself into an audience and people taking your side due to not really liking someone else on more popular shows. So it's like I'm watching Brundle or Luke, and like they keep on having someone on, and I really don't like them. So the friendship revolves around dislike of someone else. And, so there is a value to blood sports and gaining an audience that way. But at this point, like, I don't think there's anything to gain. There's no more audience. The opinions have kind of been expressed. So just like dead end, waste of time and dragging people down to the lowest common denominator. And to me, it's just bad for everybody.
And their position is basically it's part of the game. You have to accept it, accept your place in the hierarchy based on subs. And they don't seem to realize that getting subs has something to do with people respecting you in the community. And people respecting you has something to do with the sort of behavior you'll more or less tolerate on your platform. So I find it confusing. And then I guess that's why the stream went on for so long with Claire. That was a 5-hour one, which is a lot longer than I would normally do, but I kind of managed to isolate the issue because at first, if people go back and watch that original stream on the Babs cast that I was with Claire for the first time, I wasn't really wise to her tactics. She kept asking questions and speculating about, well, oh, you look Jewish. Oh, that's okay. That's a good thing. Ha ha ha. And then I said, no, I'm not. And, I realized afterwards, numerous times she made the allegation, like she was even suggesting I didn't know my own family history and maybe there was somebody Jewish somewhere along the line. And to me, the offense is, the reason that offends me is because it's sort of implying that I don't know my own family history or that my family are liars or that I'm a liar, right? So she doesn't understand why that's offensive. And to me, I don't understand how that's not offensive. So I guess for that, there's that disconnect that maybe just rhetorically we can't quite bridge the gap. Sadly, it's a real shame because I've said this before. Claire does have some talent in radio.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll discuss that later. Also, I was mentioning on offline that kind of the role the token person plays, where Claire is somewhat like a ranking member in alt-right, the white nationalist circles. In terms of kind of like Luke Ford, where Luke Ford is in journalism, and I mean, he's obviously much more professional, has like equipment and timestamps his videos, and spent a bunch of money on a computer, and he's got Kevin Michael Grace or whatever. But like in terms of connections, Claire's actually pretty connected, and she has major names. Almost everyone who has been on Luke Ford or Brundle knows who Claire is, has talked with Claire.
Yeah, that's true. She was mentioning. how she had some big names on her channel and had a chance to talk to them. So she does also update her blog very frequently. I haven't been there today to see if there's even more wonderful things being written about me.
You know, she could probably be like Luke Ford if she was. Luke Ford's relatively professional in his approach to journalism. You know, whatever you might dislike or, you know, say his personal flaws are in terms of like journalism, he's very professional. You know, he's invested in the equipment. He's got a good camera and sound system, and he actually, you know, I mean, largely thanks to Halsey and his donations, was able to put, you know, thousands of dollars into equipment for his streaming. He timestamps his video. He's got his Twitter. Like, I mean, he's very. I mean, from my perspective, I think Luke Ford is actually probably the most professional live streamer, maybe at period, like from anyone. You know, not just in these circles, certainly in these circles. But you know, if Claire stepped her game up like that, she could probably be like Luke Ford. You know, she'd have to get a camera and invest in a computer and, you know, the different type things. And I mentioned that to you, you know, when you first started streaming, that you know, at the end of the day, if you really like doing it, you're gonna have to invest the money in the computer equipment and be professional, because a message is only a certain percent, maybe even a minority of what's important for streaming. The, you know, the terms of optics and mic and video quality and you know, tweeting out and, you know, clearly timestamping, these type things that make your videos user friendly might actually be more important than the content itself.
Well, there's something to be said for professionalism. I'll agree with you on that. And I think that's the funny part about about this milieu is that people's idea about professional standards differ quite a bit. And it's funny for me because coming from a professional environment and having, you know, more or less rigid protocols in that, and then realizing that, you know, at some point that you're not going to get along with every single person that you work with. And, you know, hating them outwardly or, like, you know, making it really clear that you have a problem with them as a person is going to be very bad for your career, I think. And so basically, you know, the people don't do that. You know, you don't like someone, okay, but you're still professional towards them, right? And that was kind of what I was trying to do vis-a-vis Luke with Brundle. Like, I don't think I ever started anything. I know for a fact I never started anything with him, and tried multiple times to be professional, but he always seemed to want to push that boundary of professionalism. So yeah, Claire, like, I guess you're talking about Luke and Claire being kind of similar in potential. I think if Luke was blogging about the people that came on his show in the same way that Claire blogs about the people that go on her show, I don't think he would have that good of a platform. Because, I mean, from maybe, I guess, when he was back in the day when he was a porn journalist, he did write unfavorable things, from what I understand, and received some death threats as a result of that. Like, it was causing him problems because of what he had said about people. But I don't really get the vibe he does that in the current incarnation of his career, right?
Well, it is its career, but I'm saying he's a journalist for more famous people. So Claire is more personal. She's like writing whole things on your relative, you know, nobodies that are, you know, even, you know, me and you, who are your people who aren't famous, so to say, that, you know, what does it pay for Claire to write like a blog on Doooovid when almost no one's heard of me? No one's reading his blog is going to have heard of me. You know, so Luke is, you know, I say he was kind of like paparazzi for the alt-right, chasing down Richard Spencer and these names and, you know, interrupting for live updates, covering Unite the Right and these type things. And I meant his professionalism largely in his delivery of his podcast. You know, besides, I mean, yeah, to some extent, like avoiding drama, and he's got, you know, certain professionalism and how to treat people. But I was largely just referring to the delivery of the quality of his, you know, video, computer equipment, timestamping the videos.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that, you know, the fact that if he was negative, if he was blogging about the people who appeared on the show in a negative light after they appeared on the show, my guess is people would just stop coming on, because they.
Well, that is what happened. That, you know, that's why JF and Richard Spencer and those, you know, those people stopped coming on his show, and they even discussed them. He played it on the show where just like a bunch of old like weird men talking about like the sex lives of alt-righters. So eventually those people just stopped appearing on his show. But for a regular period of time, he was in good terms with the major names in the alt-right, and that's what ruined his ability to get those people to come regularly.
Yeah, so Claire maybe should take a lesson from all this, the tabloid style coverage of people who have like, Claire, you seem to think that people have to have the same worldview as you and the same values as you. You can't really accept that other people have different values, and some people might not want to be associated with people who counter-signal them even in any way, shape, or form. And
you don't have to. You don't have to be on good terms. I mean, it's like Richard Spencer and Matt Forney or something, where Richard Spencer refuses to be on a channel that platforms Matt Forney, and Luke Ford will platform Matt Forney. So Luke Ford could have a successful channel that reports about Richard Spencer, even though Richard Spencer refuses to talk with him. So I mean, he had to make that calculation. Okay, if Richard Spencer is going to appear in a show once every 3 months, but he's going to refuse to appear in a show, if he doesn't meet all these stipulations of what you can and can't talk about, who he could platform, versus Matt Forney might appear in a show multiple times a week. That is actually more. It's going to lead to better streaming to be on the bad side of these people and talk about them regularly than to be on the good side of them. So I mean, there is that audience, there is that perspective of the opposite where you could be like a troll paparazzi, and you could see that from your haters like that, saying like, well, you could be on good terms with me and we could stream together, or the person's like, no, I could be your eternal hater and just troll you from now till forever. And if it's like Bad Goy Productions or something, saying like, no, I mean, he gets 50, 100 views for making videos making fun of you.
Yeah, that's really funny. And
there is saying, okay, so someone just like, I'm just a troll, I'm always going to be a troll. There is that element to that, and like Brundle might be in that situation where he's like, am I a troll, or is he going to move into like serious streaming? And he might not have it in him, so he might just be like, I'm going to keep on being your troll. Like, I don't care. Like 10 years from now, I'll still be trolling you. And that will limit what he could do. But he could conceivably, have a successful troll. It's like the Irony Bros. The Irony Bros have a successful, they might even make money. They might even make a living being successful internet trolls.
That's funny because I hadn't heard of the Irony Bros. Haven't heard much of anything they've done in the last little while. Have you been following them?
No, not at all. I mean, I would say long term, the righteous are rewarded and the wicked are punished, and you don't think there's a long term game plan in trolling. Then you would see like Andy Worski fizzling out. I would tend to say that, but no, I think trolls could keep on trolling. Maybe they can't make a living off of it. Maybe they have to keep on opening up new accounts. But it would appear to be that a lot of these people who've been trolling have been doing it a long time and have no intention of stopping.
Well, that's kind of an interesting question, right? Like, we're in a culture that is already so heavily influenced by trolling, and then we have to kind of talk to people and navigate through the circles. And then you've got these people who are willing to cut themselves off from talking to people because they platform other people. And that to me just seems like an infinitely complicated, like, so basically what that's saying is anyone you're going to talk to, you have to go through the entire history of every person that this person has talked to and decide if you are okay with it. It just seems, it doesn't seem practical at all. To me,
you could be a troll master where it's even like Luke Ford or something, like you say, like, you're like, who's this person trolling me? And then you look on Luke Ford's show and it's like, this guy has a wrench in your chat. And so I mean, there is that certain like hierarchy of trolls. So it's like, who trolls you? And then if you looked at the Luke Ford show, how many of your trolls have wrenches in Luke Ford's chat?
Oh, Doovid, you're funny. Luke gives many people a wrench. There's a question here from a gentleman. I I am not sure how to pronounce his name because it's in Asian
Chris
characters.
Cantwell said that to him. I mean,
Oh, did he?
yeah, he was saying. I mean, he called Luke out. He's like, like you got a lot of jerks in your chat with wrenches.
Oh, I thought he was talking about Dino Spumoni and them because
I don't know who he recognized, but whoever he was recognized, he's like, this dude has been trolling me a long time. Like, just every time I pop on anywhere, this guy's just bashing me nonstop. And then you look on. I mean, I looked at Luke's got like God forbid he's got an Adolf Hitler with a wrench.
oh
and,
I'm sorry. I thought that my impression from that exchange was that he was going on. I don't know if it because I'm just not super interested in these shows, but I don't know if it was the gas station or one of those type of shows he went on. And the way he said it was that people were coming on and insulting him regularly. And then he came on one day and he kind of got to defend himself. And then in the subsequent days, people were just still insulting him. And I don't really think Luke ever really did that. Luke sort of is a bit.
You're saying those people have wrenches in his chat.
Oh, okay.
It's just like Bad Goy Productions or Mistopheles or something like that. He's got a wrench in Luke's show. So I'm saying he constantly makes negative videos about you and me. But he's got a wrench in Luke's chat.
There's a question here. What does Doooovid think about Chime Ben Pisach? I'm not sure how to say that word. Did you want to field that one, or do you want to just keep going?
Who else I have to look up if I read that?
Okay, so I think it is a bit people's expectation that like Doooovid is on trial for the crimes of the Jews is like that is the wrong attitude, because to blame one person and I kind of get some of this too, like people want to basically blame me for Hinduism, let's say. And it's not the way to, like, what's your goal in all this? Is your goal in all this to increase your knowledge, have a better understanding of what's going on in the world? Or is your goal in this just to have a straw, like pick out a straw man and burn an effigy of a straw man for all time? Because I can tell you that the burning the effigies, that ends up just with burning down the entire society. Like these impulses are connected. There's a micro and a macro. And so nobody's perfect. Okay, we're all flawed humans. But if we all decide that we want to reach the truth, we're going to have a lot more success than if we decide up from the get-go that we're mortal enemies. So I just hope people can bring that on board, maybe. But yes, please go on. I don't know if you actually saw, Doooovid, but I've been putting this article I just made in the background. I wanted to share it again. It's a couple of parse metrics that I've imposed on the quantum mind, so that people can.
Yeah, I've opened it. Hopefully we talk about that. Maybe we should cover, before we move into like the week in advancement of scientific theory, the different streaming. And you had run a blog post earlier about like how Sargon, after he kind of like lost the debate to Richard Spencer, and said like he's tired and can't talk anymore, and then all of a sudden he has like a sympathy stream with some of his supporters. Were you the one who was writing about that?
That was one of the funnier things.
Or is that what happened with Brutus? I mean, the reason I was mentioning, because like Brutus, like rages against you. Like, did he actually kick you, or did you just leave, or did he actually bounce you?
Maybe we can have a listen and see what happened, because
I can't tell if he actually like ejected you from the chat, or if you hung up, or if he ejected you. But yeah, I mean, if you want to play that, but either way, it seemed like, and then he has like Norvin on for like sympathy. So like he ejects you, he bashes you, and then like all of a sudden like Norvin pops in, and it's like, oh, that's all right, Brutus. Like, she's bad. It's
I've just written an article about how to tell when someone wins a debate and how to tell when someone loses, and that the sympathy streaming was one of the ways of knowing that someone.
Yeah, but I don't know if you thought about that with what happened with his like, he's got to bring Norvin on for sympathy after.
I think,
and I've been wanting to talk with Brutus, for a while about the roles of Jews in ISKCON. To saying that like relatively, like he makes a few points of Prabhupada's quotes about, Hitler or about like Jews and finance, but like generally, Prabhupada, the founder of ISKCON, had a positive view towards Jews. He purposely missionized in Israel and recruited Jews and gave Jews powerful roles in his movement. And, till today, Jews have a pretty dominant force. And I don't know, I was thinking they have like Durgadas. I don't know if he's like a self-hating Jew, but if he would come on and Durgadas would speak with Brutus the British, and I don't know if Durgadas would like agree with everything Brutus says, or if he'd like defend the Jews in that case.
It would be an interesting conversation. I somehow doubt Brutish will be interested in talking to me again, but I'm always open to another conversation because I don't really feel like that one completed. So I'll play a bit of a. I'll screen share so people can see the comments. We've got Norvin in there, and we can see what his commentary is.
I mean, he's also a pretty big name in the alt-right, and he knows. He's streamed with hundreds of people, not like the biggest names, but like the second-tier names around the world.
Yeah. Let's have a listen. Okay, thanks for having me. Oh, okay, yeah. This is right when he booted me, so I'll go back a couple minutes to. Get away.
You're saying he did boot you? He did eject you from the call.
He said he didn't kick me out. He just asked me to leave, and I was happy to comply because I'm not, I'm whatever. I don't want to be somewhere I'm not wanted.
William Shockley, when he invented the transistor, did he read the Bhagavad Gita or any of it? I doubt it. But he invented the transistor, and he was very racist.
Well, good for him. I mean, Europeans came up with tons of stuff. I'm not denying that. This is a question of historical accuracy and.
No, the point you're making is the Vedas are the source of all knowledge. I thought, right, that's interesting, but we're not qualified to use it. Okay, I'm no longer interested. See, this is the thing. It doesn't appeal to me if I don't.
This idea that I'm going to spoon feed you eternal wisdom is an indication that you're not spiritually ready to receive it, right?
Oh, no, I don't even need that. I just need to be given the tool so I can do it myself. I mean, if the texts are written somewhere, and if I can read it.
It doesn't work like that. Oral tradition. There is learning without the master. This is the whole point. This is the whole point.
Do you have a guru?
This is when I kind of knew it was going to be going downhill. This was the point where we were at a fork in the road and we could have gone towards Salvage City, but we went to, we went the other way.
Do you have a guru?
In a way.
Right, so you don't have a guru either. So you're not connected to the.
I do. It's just that I didn't. Okay, so I wouldn't want.
So you don't have a guru. So you're not connected to the.
So he couldn't even let me finish a sentence. So clearly the guy is. Again, this is it's a professionalism thing, right? Like you shouldn't really be letting your emotions run wild and just cutting people off halfway through a sentence. It doesn't. It's bad optics.
Vedic tradition at all, because the Vedic tradition is all about receiving mantra from the guru, and you don't have a guru.
Well, I do. However, what I'm teaching in this life is stuff that I derived by myself. So it would be a mistake to think that I got that knowledge.
So you're speculating.
He probably should have at least read a couple of articles off my blog, because it's very clear at this point he has no idea about anything that I've done. And this is the same mistake people make with you, Doovid. They think, oh yeah, I'm gonna BTFO this guy. I got my list of points. It's like, it doesn't work like that. Doovid is, I don't want to say the master of pill pull, because I don't really feel like I'm an expert on pill pull, but for what it's worth, you've got some skill, Doovid.
You just didn't do any research.
Exactly. And I mean, how well do you expect something to go if you don't know anything about the person you're talking to? Like, I didn't ask to come on this guy's stream. He emailed me. And I'm not going to say no because, this is what I do, that I have to speak with people. Yes, everyone's speculating, aren't they? It's just who's
Well, you're not following the Veda, are you?
Am I? Are you entitled to judge me? Answer no.
Answer yes, because I actually have a guru. I'm following the Vedic tradition.
Read.
Vedic,
Yeah, because the Veda tradition says get a guru and take mantra from the guru. You don't have
Well,
a
he means
guru.
Prabhupada. I mean, that's why I was interested in speaking with him, because he does mean Prabhupada. I mean, from what I know, he is actually a disciple of Prabhupada from the Hare Krishna movement.
All right. Well, I'll move a couple of pieces on my 17-dimensional chessboard, Doovid, and
I mean, he's a renegade disciple.
we'll see if we can get this convo between the two of you going. I would love to be the moderator, but something tells me we're going to have to go through a proxy for this one.
Just reading a bunch of books and speculating.
I would go on his channel. I would suffer the abuse on his channel because he's a Prabhupada disciple.
Oh, great. Good to know.
I don't know if he wants to have me on his channel, but like I would even have an unfair setting against me.
I think the best way to go would be for you both to go on a different channel that was as neutral as possible. I mean, I just want to play up to when he kicks me off because it's coming up pretty soon.
What are you talking about?
You don't know anything about me, dude. Okay? You don't know anything about me. Now I'm fixing your fucking problems here, and your attitude is absolutely terrible because you're having an emotional.
We sat here and we tolerated you for an hour, going on and on about how great India is and how stupid we are, and laughing at us. But you've never even been there, and you don't know what you're talking about. And we're your allies, and you're attacking us, and you're attacking European people. And you're constantly saying you when you're referring to white people. And it makes me wonder, well, are you a white person or no? What are you? Are you white? Are you Jewish? Are you an Indian? What the fuck are you?
I'm an Indian reincarnated as a white person to say, you done fucked up. And I'm telling you this because I care about you, not because I hate you. And the fact that you think that criticism translates to hatred is an indication of how Judaized your thought process has become. So you just need to take a step back and stop engaging emotionally here. Just try to judge the merits of what I'm saying based on the facts. I'm not the one who lied about the Aryan invasion theory, okay? But I corrected it. You should be thankful for that.
All right, sweetheart. Well, look, anyway, look, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for coming on the show. And I wish you all the best of luck, but you're doing my head in. So I'm just going to ask you to leave now. Thanks.
Okay, thanks for having me.
All right. Okay, thank you.
So that's like, to me, extremely unprofessional behavior.
Because he is a tirade. I don't know if you want to go through the play his tirade against you. But then
I didn't actually see it. Would you know where it is?
It's right after. I mean, right after you leave, he goes against you for like 5 minutes. He just like yells at you once you leave. I mean, if you want to bear his spite, then you could play it. Bad Guy clipped it on his page also.
You know me. I'm not afraid of opposition. I can definitely keep going a bit.
Just
Oh, for fuck me. God fucking damn it, she annoyed me.
no, I had that as well. Nothing she said was appealing. She wasn't willing to meet us halfway.
What a fucking stuck up, arrogant bitch. Jesus fucking Christ. She really got under my skin. Oh.
Well, mind you.
Yeah, he's the arrogant, stuck-up bitch. And I just doxed his ego.
The chat seems to be quite lively, so there's that at least.
Oh,
I have a fever, by the way.
I'm not into the whole internet blood sports people. I'm sorry.
He's not into it, so he decided to take on the reigning champion and have an emotional breakdown.
Well, he decides to kick you and then bash you. I mean, internet blood sports would be where he kept you on the stream and allowed you to respond, but instead he waits till you leave. It's like the internet blood sports stabbed the guy, God forbid, in the chest, not in the back, but here he's stabbing you in the back.
Well, that's the thing. Like, this is why, there's a theme here, people. There's a lesson to be learned. It's probably not a good idea to want to, quote, blood sport somebody you happen to see on a couple streams and maybe don't know anything about. Like, I don't exactly know. I feel like he could have taken that conversation in whatever direction he wanted to, but he was pretty insistent. I guess he pretty much feels like he has scripture figured out, and it's now his role to judge other people. I guess I don't know a whole heck of a lot about the guy, to be honest. So maybe sometime you could talk to him. I would definitely tune into that. I think that would be extremely extremely entertaining.
Yeah, I mean, from what I understand, I mean, he was a Hare Krishna missionary in England or Scotland, and then he kind of became bitter against the movement because what he blamed on the Jews, and there's like the conspiracy that Jewish disciples, God forbid, poisoned Prabhupada and took over the movement. I mean, currently today there are a lot of different people in the movement, but disproportionate percentage of them are Jewish. Maybe even as many as like 25% of the senior management is Jewish, and so he just kind of like turned against the Jews and blamed his lack of success in the movement on the Jews. And but he's kept some of the teachings. He appears to still kind of like Prabhupada vegetarianism, but he has this kind of like, let's unify around the problem of the Jews. And he has a few quotes from Prabhupada that, Prabhupada was childhood friends with Sudra Chandra's Bose, if you're familiar with the Indian history, who founded the Indian Liberation Army and actually met with Hitler and senior ranking Nazi officials that recognized a free and independent India, that Britain controlled India at the time. And so the Nazi Germany made a strategic move with Sudra Chandra's Bose to recognize a free and independent Hindu India, with like the common.
Interestingly, there's some conspiracy theories that Bose himself was mixed up with the Russian communists. This is not something I've looked into too much myself, but that might be an interesting avenue.
There's a nuanced view. I mean, Senka Prabhupada was friends with Bose, and he supported him. He was basically a Hindu nationalist, so he does say some good things about Hitler in that sense. But the evidence that Prabhupada had bad opinions of the Jews is almost none, because obviously he had his books translated into Hebrew. He wanted his movement. He sent letters. He sent disciples to Israel. He chose many of the people he personally chose to take over the movement were Jewish. And a lot of the Jews contributed quite a bit to the movement. I tried to have that discussion with Durgadas, and he took like a very negative opinion. I don't know if he's like kind of like the self-hating Jews, but saying like ISKCON was incorporated by Jews. Prabhupada's first visa to America came from Jews. Allen Ginsberg, famous one. A lot of the foundation. I mean, you could make a pretty clear argument with that. But if it wasn't for Jewish converts to Hinduism, so to say, there wouldn't be an ISKCON. And so I would be interested to have that conversation with Brutus and just, but whatever, he may or may not want to do that.
There are ways to get people to do the things you want them to do, Doovid.
Well, that's why I'm having this conversation with you. He's just got like some sort of irrational Jew hatred that in reality is holding himself down. Saying like, okay, maybe he was wronged by specific Jews, maybe he wasn't. I don't know. Even if he was wronged by specific Jews, does that rationalize this overall hatred? Or if he looks at it the direction of the movement he was part of, and that there was a force of Jews that took it in a direction that he didn't approve of, or whatever, voice that argument to just basically hosting like an anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish talk show. To becoming like an anti-Jewish talk show host, that is there logic? Is it benefiting himself even, for his own good, even just for his own sake, his own good? What's he doing? Does he ruin his own life for nothing to benefit? And a lot of people argued, like he's your new like white nationalist, and I guess that's what he was trying to recruit you, like in saying like he wanted you to recognize the, God forbid, global threat of the Jewish people and like join forces with them.
Would you like to keep watching a bit more of the stream?
If you want, go ahead.
On my show, they can say whatever they like, and I can disagree with them, but she's just, what a fucking haughty, stuck-up bitch. Jesus Christ, I'm better than you. I know everything. You're fucking stupid. Jesus. Oh. Sorry, I'm just going to give me a few minutes to chill out here.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, did you notice how she seems to be, she would not acknowledge any of my points?
No social intelligence. No idea of how to talk to anybody in a rational way.
Apparently, I'm not politically correct enough for the whoever these people are.
I was listening to your thing about June before I came on.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was good. It was interesting hearing your take on it as well. I've probably blown it up in my mind, but it was very influential on me when I first read it.
Yeah. I mean, because I'm just to clarify. I mean, this is what annoys me so much.
You're so triggered.
Because I'm on her side, you know. I believe in Vedic culture myself, and she's just sitting there.
He believes in LARPing as an Aryan king and then coming in and telling natives how to do their own religion. Don't fool yourself. This guy may have spent 9 years in India, but he does not know the Veda.
God fucking damn it, you know? I mean, I
think, did you notice how she sort of skirted around what Thorgrim was saying as well?
Yeah.
She would not give a straight answer to any of us, and I found that most insulting of all. I mean,
maybe a transistor is not like a kill shot that these people think it is. They need to go to Pilpul school a little bit, I think, to sharpen up their debate skills.
She was saying the Vedic teaching source of knowledge. I was like, all right, can you qualify that? Can you? I even mentioned the Akashic records, and she didn't correct me. She didn't see anything about that.
Yeah,
about the Akashic records.
Yeah, if I can just reference a part of your book, Brutus, where you talk about was it if you're in the army and you've got a disobedient soldier and he doesn't have a better, if he complains about your plan and he doesn't have a better plan, you shoot him. He's the first person you shoot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, right at the beginning. Punishment duty, maybe.
Well, it's just like, what the fuck is she saying? We all have to follow the Veda, but you're not qualified to follow the Veda.
I think the real point here is that we have to take a look at who we're accepting as an authority in different subjects. And this guy's basically, I don't know who this guy's guru is, but he's basically declared himself an authority. And I highly doubt his guru gave him license to do that, because that would mean that he had the burden of representing his guru's entire tradition. And given this little emotional meltdown, I don't see how any self-respecting guru would want such a person representing their tradition.
I mean, how can anybody follow that?
So if we can't follow it because we're too thick, we're too degenerate, whatever, what's plan B? You know,
yeah, what kind of philosophy is that?
This is why they should have read the blog, given all the fact that there's all that wonderful information there.
Sell to people, you know. Like I am following this philosophy, which is vastly superior to anything that you have, but also you're not qualified to follow it either. Like all you can.
I think it's, yeah, for qualification, like there's levels of qualification, right? Like people can apply the quantum periodic table without any initiation whatsoever, but they actually have to use their brain. And so they couldn't really use anything in the periodic table unless they understood something else about mathematics or logic or something along the spatial visualization capacity, things like that. So I guess I have a hard time understanding what these guys' problems is. I guess we can stop the playback now, but yeah,
you don't have to show it, but then he goes to, like, you know, he brings Norvin on for like some sympathy. So like Norvin's like, oh, it's all right, Church of Entropy, she's horrible, I know. And then like he seems like appeased by that I don't know if you want to fast forward to when Norvin hops on.
Yep, I can do that. Try to see where I can see his icon. Maybe it's let's see here.
It should be easy, just wherever his icon appears.
Alrighty.
You know, it seems like Trump's just been sitting there for 2 years, letting this whole Russia thing go on, letting the left attack him and attack him and attack him. And we've all been sitting here waiting for the Mueller investigation to get shut down, but for him to start fighting back. And this William Barr guy, who is the Attorney General now, who replaced, what's his face? He's now...
Jeff Sessions.
Jeff Sessions. He says now he's going to strike back. He's going to start investigating them.
Well, we've known this for a long time, but wasn't it Obama who had wiretapped Trump's?
So how's it going, buddy? We were going to have you on a couple of weeks ago, and you didn't come on because you said you were afraid of getting our channel shut down or whatever. I don't know. You were angry about something, but anyway, it's good to have you on now.
Yeah, it's actually an interesting story. I had, right before I was going to be on your show, I had been on another stream, and I got into an argument with a guy and had a pretty bad spurg out. He was kind of coming at me with some libertarian talking points and telling me I should get off SSI and go become a greeter at Walmart. I kind of cussed him out, and I felt kind of bad. And I've had that happen a few times, get on streams with people and get into big things. So I thought maybe for a while I should take a break from streaming. Actually, that woman you just had on, I've had several fights with her, and one was really bad. It got flipped. She got under my skin because I got pressured into staying on a show and debating her till 2 in the morning. And finally, at 2 in the morning, I just told her to kill herself.
Yeah, well, I can understand that. She was a bit annoying, wasn't she?
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I just kicked her off, because I just thought, well, this isn't going to go anywhere. We're just going to, shouting at each other. And I just can't be bothered with that kind of bollocks,
Yeah, no, I get that. And she's a very, very toxic person. It's not a meme. It's actually highly rumored that she is at least a partial Jewish ancestry. She looks very Jewish.
Highly rumored. Do, 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 do.
She actually hangs around with a bunch of Jews, despite her claims of being anti-Semitic. One of her co-hosts.
I never made that claim. I
got an honorable mention here, I think.
I am strictly pro-truth, my friends. Pro-truth.
On her channel, Elliot Blatt is an open, admitted Jew.
Yeah, I did notice this, that she's doing a regular show with that Doooovid guy who's a Jew. And I was thinking, oh, well, maybe that's a bit dodgy. But, you got to give people the benefit of the doubt, right? She says she's not Jewish, so whatever.
But that's your white male mindset again, giving people the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah. I don't like
to speak Jewy.
Yeah, she did. I don't like to accuse people of being Jews if I don't have the evidence. But yeah, I mean, I know where you're coming from with that.
And there's zero evidence.
One, Jesus fucking Christ, she was annoying. And the way she kept saying you.
Did it ever occur to this dumb fuck that he's really, 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 really annoying to me, and I find his manner distasteful, but that I have the emotional composure not to spurg out about that?
When talking about
the biggest clue is when someone that slips up and they say you people.
Yeah. And she kept doubling down on it as well. And I was okay. It's a bit weird, you know what I mean?
Yep.
I guess I say that because I feel like I'm outside of Western culture in a lot of ways. So I shouldn't say it, but to say we would imply we actually had something in common.
Well, the fact that she kept addressing European people as a whole, but then when I tried to get her to clarify, then she said, no, it's just a small segment of European people who believe some things. And it's kind of like, well, then what's the point?
I said she was just
like any group of people, and some people will find things different.
Yeah. You don't have to play it over. I thought it was funny, like your Sargon comparative where he needs like sympathy from Norvin. And he's like, "Thank you, Norvin. Thank you for taking." He needed some sort of affirmation that he's good and you're bad, and like Norvin's the one that provides him that affirmation.
Well, you gotta love these staunch white nationalists, right? Who LARP about purity 24/7, but are willing to side with Claire Kaw because she maybe is opposed to me. You gotta love the irony.
Well, I would say that I could see that the Vedic teachings have had a positive influence on Brutus. I mean, so it's one thing you see a guy like that and you be like, oh my God, you're an embarrassment to the Vedas. And then you have to say like, oh, well, you didn't know me before I came onto the Vedic teaching. So in my impression, the Vedas probably had a substantially positive influence on him.
Yeah, before his Vedic teachings, he was probably just like Jay on Claire's stream. Did you see that? That was like a 20-minute meltdown.
Yeah, I mean, so you could see like some positive qualities in Brutus still, and it's likely that it was the Vedic teachings that instilled those positive qualities in him.
Yeah. So before Brutus discovered,
that might be qualified. You say like, okay, like, I mean, the level of his scholarship or the his personality, but from a lover of the Vedic principles and the Vedic teachings, you say, yes, I believe that the Vedic teachings, Prabhupada, ISKCON, had a positive influence on Brutus, and had he not came on to that, God forbid how bad his personality might be.
Yeah, this is Brutus before he discovered the Artava Veda.
That's all right. I'm used to that. So, what I was going to speak to you about is I had a realization later today, and that doesn't happen very often, so I took advantage of it. All of, and it relates to our conversation this morning about that horrid lady, and she is horrid, Jen Scharf. I sense that in the last year and a half, maybe a couple of years, whatever, there is a nice little community growing of people who are different backgrounds, different intelligence levels, as Luke would say, different IQs, different religions, but all kind of virtually every day going online, listening to streams, Luke's streams, your stuff, Brundle Fly, Jonathan's stuff. There are people in the chat, like Glib, loads of others, and maybe about 30 or 40 people. Ben Noach and Alex Woodrow, and I don't know these people, but I know the names, and it's sort of it's quite nice, really. And Brutus, and there's quite a lot of good things there, and along comes Jennifer Scharf. Now,
oh no! Fee, fi, fo, fum! I smell the blood of an Englishman.
Now, she does not fit in to any of the ideology of the people, politically, religiously, socially. She's a vile, corrupt, spiritual narcissist.
Yeah, so we don't have to keep watching too much. But this went on for quite a while. Did you catch this one?
No, I didn't even, I popped in the chat for a few minutes for a few of the shows, but I just didn't have, you did 20 hours of streams with Claire this week, so I watched probably less than 30 minutes of it.
Yeah, I almost feel bad for Dennis Dale. He seems kind of like a
that one I watched about 30 minutes of. I think, that one was probably more pleasant. Dennis seems like a more upbeat, pleasant person.
I don't know him very well. As I understand, he was streaming with Luke. Maybe just around the time I started listening to Luke was when he was no longer on the show. And
he's actually the one who introduced Luke to KMG.
Oh, is that right? Interesting. A little more piece of trivia in the Lucosphere. So
in Portland, Oregon, and he had some sort of. I spoke. But you had problems with Dennis, or he seemed like he was pretty nice to you.
I didn't have any problems with him, and yeah, I guess by and large, I think I don't really have any problems with anybody. People.
I actually had pretty good experience with Jay. I was on Claire's stream with him a few times, and we got along pretty well. But yeah, I could see kind of like Jay is Brutus without the Vedic teachings. So you could see the Vedic teachings have had a positive influence, and you could look at the personality that say, no, the Vedic teachings are powerful, and however much of a easier person to deal with Brutus is than Jay, you could probably credit that to the Vedic teachings.
Wow, that's hilarious. Not hilarious, sorry. Laughing's degenerate. That's extremely fascinating. Not funny at all. But I wanted to have, I don't know if I can do this every week because some weeks are less exciting than others, but this week was really awesome for creation of content. So I wanted to play the beatdown of the week. So we have, this blood sports thing, and sometimes it tends towards better debates, more structured, and sometimes it tends towards these sort of slap fest beatdowns. So I wanted to give the award for the best beatdown of the week was by Patrick Bateman against Hey Bada Boom Bada Bing Pizza STFU with James. So I'm just going to play that one real quick. It's only about a minute long.
Okay. Yeah. You did a lot more. Usually I'm the one doing most of the talking because I'm doing a lot more streaming than you. But this week you did 10 times as much streaming as me.
This is like grub brain, like conservative, like insults. Your insults are just like the left. What's the difference between you and the left? You're political. Because I'm stupid. You insult. Your ideology is too stupid to insult. Really, James? Really? What I tried to say like 2 hours ago, your story, fascism, doesn't interest anybody. Okay? And the only... It shows and like you're still in purist conservative basically bottom text ideology motivates anyone? I don't think so. The only person that motivates are people like you that drive trucks for a living and bottom text all day, trying to spread your shitty ideology on Breitbart. Why don't you go back to fucking Breitbart and spread your fucking diarrhea there? You're fucking nuts. Oh, go be angry at your own well, I guess he'd cut you off if you did. I sent the $25, James. Then do it, then shut your mouth and fucking joke.
Yes, go back to Breitbart, indeed.
Well, that was James?
Yes, the guy who started, the one on Poll's stream, the one we thought had a different name for a while.
Yeah, I mean, he became like Poll's KMG. He's there for like hours every day. He re-uploaded that, like our blood sports, our Athens versus Jerusalem. He just did that today. And, you know, he's kind of like, okay, like he's like complete like blood sports, like Doooovid, Judaism's a fake religion. Everything you do is bad. And then he's kissing the ass of Babs.
Oh my
God. So it's
God.
like every time like I'm anywhere near him, he's just like pure like attack dog. But like for whatever reason, Babs has this like calming effect and turns into a poodle.
Yeah, you seem to have a triggering effect, and it is funny to
see Babs have the opposite effect on a lot of these people, like
well,
Eki, James.
I don't think anybody hates Babs.
Well, I think Norvin does. I mean, like if you have like a straight viewer saying like if the reason you, yeah, I mean, I think to some respect I mean that's why Norvin would be more consistent.
Oh, okay, yeah, I guess in that sense, I mean, unless Sinkowitz ends up being a Jew.
Wait, I mean, Norvin was willing to forgive him his few percent or whatever, and say that could be a testing error. Oh, I think. Daniel actually said he knows, like even from Family Tree, that it's true. But either way, yeah, I mean, like Daniel, James, Eke, there's a whole list of them that you know, even people in this chat like El Jim and just like Doooovid, they become a tech dog, and you know, Babs, they become like like a poodle, and you know, that's not all. You know, like not everyone's like that. I'm saying there's certainly. You know, like I don't think Brutus or something like that, or you know, is gonna become like a poodle for Babs.
I get the vibe that Babs is on a spirit quest. He seems to be very interested in archetypes. I'm actually very interested to stream with him at some stage. He had messaged me recently to do that, so hopefully we can set that up sometime soon. Because maybe this would be a good time to actually get into the mind of Babs and see what motivates him and his experience.
He doesn't appear on so many streams, and most of his streams. He doesn't do so much of the talking. So to some extent, it's like, it's the delusion, like, oh, Jews have too much power and they use their nepotism. But then at the same time, it's like, oh, maybe I could actually benefit. Like if this Babs guy likes me, you know, he could really hook me up. So you know, to some extent, he just platforms people. Most of his streams, you know, he's talking for less than like 5% of his own streams. And, very rarely does he appear on other people's streams. Like he rejected going on Claire's stream. She tried to get him on, and even different streams. You know, Luke, he's always on Luke. Like basically, I think Luke sends him the invite, like the hangout every single night.
He probably didn't want to be on Claire's because he didn't want to end up on her tabloid blog. I can't say I blame him.
Well, yeah, I mean, he could have the controlled, you know, like kind of like frame games or something like that, where if you could have it controlled. Where you could only appear on streams where people are going to like, you would just put you in a positive light and treat you really well, and you could reject all the other streams. Presumably, like that's most people would prefer it that way. So but Babs has the advantage of getting the link on Luke's stream every night, and so the people who appear on his stream are kind of like a testing ground to get on the Luke Ford show. So there's a little bit of a power imbalance there. Why would a guy like Eke and Daniel and James and all these guys be kissing Babs' ass? Because that's their path to like the Luke Ford stream, or even Millennial Woes or something like that. Or I doubt Babs could get someone on Millennial Woes, but even he was on that. So that that dynamic where Norvin or maybe Brutus would just completely reject that. Your guys like Daniel, be like, well, like if Babs could hook me up, I'm going to take it. Like even though I'm speaking out against all this, Jewish nepotism and Jewish power, if kissing the ass of one Jew could get me ahead in life, I'll do it.
I guess I haven't seen enough of those streams to be able to know to what extent he was kissing his ass.
Well, even just the archetype type where it's just like, you're going to plug your nose and do it because you want to get ahead.
Yeah, has he been around for a while, this Sinkowitz guy? Because I
think Babs has been around for a while. Babs was doing this for like years, like going back years before it was even on YouTube, and he knows a lot of these people. I mean, he was doing it when he was like 12 years old or something. Like, and saying like he gets Luke Ford invites him basically every single night, and almost all of his viewers are overflow from Luke Ford show. Maybe he's got some of his own audience, but basically his show is just the overflow from the Luke Ford. And a lot of the guests on like Luke Ford, they only a show on Babs. Like Kyle, Mansoor, a lot of those people, they don't show up anywhere else than on Babs. So he's got kind of like Luke Ford's kind of like liberalism where you pick winners and losers. So for like Brundle, where like all of a sudden Brundle, like in real life, he's friends with Levy and Babs and my roommate and like Glib Medley. Like he went to hang out with these people in real life. So it's at the same time kind of like the playing both sides. So when it's Doooovid arguing multiculturalism, immigration, they're like full, like God forbid, like hardcore 1488. But at the same time, it's like, well, Babs could hook me up, like I'll plug my nose and kiss his ass.
Yeah, it's an interesting dichotomy, that's for sure. And I guess this whole people having an inconsistent persona, I don't think they realize the degree to which that can impact your optics, which is ultimately what's going to bring you subscribers, because people like someone who's consistent in some manner. And Claire is consistent, maybe not in the best manner, and other people, a lot of times they aren't. And so you start to have a certain reticence to want to engage with certain people because you don't really know what, like, are they going to go off the deep end? Are they going to start a, character assassination campaign against me? It's just a bit hostile. And, if people are wondering why people don't want to join up with your movement, this may be part of why this hostility towards me. I mean, I'm so benign.
Maybe that's a good way to transition into the week in review of advancement of scientific theories with this concept of the debate I had with OV about are ideas dangerous, and do people actually act off of ideas, or are there different forces? Like people have ideas, but likely action is not actually a derivative of ideas. Action is a derivative of multiple forces, and ideas probably weigh pretty low in terms of push comes to shove how a person acts. When we talk like dissonance, fight or flight, or kind of this overarching, people will do what they have to do to get ahead. People will do what they have to do to survive. So it's like, okay, you might have your ideas like, like I dislike the Jews. I would never kiss the ass of a Jew. But if it comes down to it, like you got to do what you got to do to survive. And next thing you know, the person who's saying all these harsh words is kissing Babs' ass, because that people don't actually act on their ideas. They act on, some sort of emotional or super influence of what they feel is in their best interest. And the brain, mammalian brain dissonance, these higher rules for sense perception that the dissonance is there, and then a person has to act. So if, even if it's James, if it's Jonathan, if it's, any of these people where they have their ideas, and then all of a sudden, like, the Babscast has just invited you to a stream. Like, do you kiss his ass in order to try to get ahead, or do you be consistent on your ideas?
What's wrong with just being nice to everybody? Unless
I'm saying if that's your idea, but I'm saying you're talking about a dissonance where you're contradicting to your ideas. So it's like Brundlefly, who like secretly is like meeting like tens of Jews and trying to like, up business deals and, makes connections in Manhattan at the same time where he's playing like an anti-Semitic persona on his channel. It's a pretty hefty duty dissonance. So maybe he's just like, well, I'm just playing a role. Really, I only care about getting ahead, and I don't mind lying. I don't mind if every word out of my mouth is a lie, as long as the check clears at the end of the day or something like that. But that's the dissonance. Are you consistent with your ideas, or not? And does that even matter? If someone calls you out and it's like, James or something, like, you have this whole video about Athens versus Jerusalem and arguing you're so proud of yourself for saying the most horrible things to Doooovid, but then here's this other video of you, it's such an honor to be able to talk about this stuff with Babs.
Yeah, and it just goes to show that people are letting their emotions dominate their reason. And this is the diagram that I had for that. You can kind of see how this is your subjective consciousness. So what I'm trying to do is parameterize the experience of being conscious. And we're all conscious, so we all know to some, we don't all transcend our consciousness, but we can all agree we have a subjective consciousness. And then we have these two instincts that kind of push on the subjective consciousness, and they fight each other for domination of the subjective consciousness. And what's happening with these meltdowns is we're getting a triggering of the survival instinct because, like you say, there's cognitive dissonance, which the person is then interpreting that cognitive dissonance as being life-threatening. Not sure if that was too much information at once there, but I
read through your blog. I actually read your blog like 3 times before the show started.
Oh, awesome. I'd love to hear your thoughts if you have any, or if you have any questions.
Yeah, so it's interesting because for a few weeks now we've been talking about this dissonance concept, and when it came down to the conversation, I'm not sure if you want to comment on this long debate I had about World War II with God forbid if the Holocaust is saying that where my interpretation was you had people that didn't really have any racial opinions about Jews or not, but they just didn't have a conscience towards killing people. So that a lot of the people that, God forbid, had a strong hatred towards another group, they couldn't actually pull the trigger. And there's been a lot of studies on this with police and military people where some studies, even 50% of people can't pull the trigger on the front line, as where you had other people that didn't necessarily have any opinions one way or another, but they just didn't have a conscious, whatever reason, and had no compunction towards killing people. And that's a pretty hefty example, like towards the ideas influencing people. And it's like, okay, were the people killer, like the good soldier, the good warrior, if it doesn't have to be, Holocaust and Jews, could be any battle, like American sniper and Muslims, or even to your, God forbid, your Brenton Torrance in the New Zealand massacre, who claimed he had absolutely no animosity towards Muslims. And, but at the end of the day, he pulled the trigger. He killed a lot of people. And if you take him at his word that he didn't actually hate the people that he killed, was he more efficient at it than someone who maybe actually hated the people? And if he had hated the people, would he have been able to pull the trigger? And I don't know if you want to talk about, violence is usually, it's a tough subject, but usually violence is the most acute way to discuss these ideas. But I'm saying, is the person acting off of ideas, or are they acting off of some sort of higher principle? And what's truly driving the motivation of the person? Like it was a Brenton Torrance, it was these ideas that caused him to do it, and he acted out on his ideas. Was it really a hatred, or was there some greater force that took him? Or if you want to take it to a lower level, then God forbid, the extreme level of killing people.
We can look at it on a couple of different levels. One general commentary that I can make is that this idea of dehumanizing people, kind of calling them a name and then straw manning the name, essentially, the way you see with the word Hinduism, people just want to look their nose down at it without really understanding what it is. It's just a big circle drawn around all Indian faiths, and they're all inferior because of these reasons. And I see that as like the first step towards violence, because when you don't have any respect for people based on a label, you don't feel so bad about killing them. And that's historically what's kind of happened. There's been this period of persecution, of like character assassination, followed by genocide. So that seems to be a pattern. And in terms of how people, like what motivates people to act, ultimately just everything is like a manifestation of your inner will. And then it's a question of, well, what is it that actually forms the will? And the will is part of the ego. So it all has to do with the person's state of mind and the extent to which their state of mind is, I guess, compassionate or possessing knowledge. And so basically, it's just always a matter of a competition between the instinct for survival and the instinct for truth. And the people's ideologies, their will is a combination of those two things. So it becomes very difficult to have conversations sometimes when people have different mashups in their ego. And so, yeah, you get these character assassination campaigns, which is eventually what leads to the violence. At least that seems to be what is the current trend. And
that's funny. I mean, this is basic Freud.
It seems to just be accelerating at this stage. So I do see it as an issue.
I think your chart here seems kind of basically like Freud.
I believe Freud said that it was impossible to know the unconscious mind, whereas we don't assume axiomatically that it's impossible to know the entire mind, subconscious mind. We don't have an answer one way or the other. So that would be one difference. In terms of the diagrammatic representation of the different parts of the mind, the only one I'm familiar with is the id, ego, and superego. Was there another teaching you wanted to maybe go over with us to show the similarities?
Well, I mean, I pop up a chart of Freud. I'm not saying you're like exactly like Freud, but I mean, it's semi like an adaptation of the Freudian understanding. I mean, he doesn't have the truth instinct, but he does have a survival instinct versus what he calls the oceanic, like bliss instinct that he later adapted. I mean, he first thought it was just a sex instinct or survival instinct, and then he added the like what he called, I think, the oceanic instinct.
Yeah, maybe at a later time we could go over the teachings of Freud and which aspects of the teachings you think are most important in the context of the quantum mind, and maybe do a bit of a comparative analysis with my diagrams, because I would say my diagrams are fairly simplistic compared to what's out there, but you have to start somewhere. And people are already complaining that my work is too complicated, but basically it can't really get much simpler than this. If you want to learn something that's correct, you have to accept that it's not going to be the easiest thing you've ever learned.
If you want to go back up to the your universal quantum computer diagram, where you have your physical manifestation, modifications, and your internal your subjective consciousness, awareness, self-awareness, pan-self-awareness, ego, physical body.
Here we go. I've got it up now.
So, I mean, this is unknown. According to the neurologist, it's unclear how the process of modifying, I mean, there's substantial evidence that we have these higher rules, whether they're genetic or intuitive or learned. I mean, there's reasonable evidence that we could learn rules and change our processes. But according to your quantum mind model, I mean, saying this is all hypothetical from what we would call rigorous scientific proof, because there's not enough neurological basis for this. Because as I mentioned, Avogadro's number 10 to the 23, we don't have a neurological explanation for how thoughts could be formed or how someone could learn something. But let's assume that the brain has these higher functioning rules for how we understand the world. And then we have our sense perception. And then there's the dissonance, like we keep on discussing week after week, where the higher functioning rules for how we understand the rules of the world is a mismatch for what our sense perception is telling us. And that's why people get triggered, like Brutus or something. If you triggered him, you demonstrated what his understanding of his internal higher functioning rules that did not match his sense perception. Hence he got triggered. But so where do the ideas come in? So let's say that you had a teaching moment with Brutus and Brutus learned something. Like, how does that come in and fit into your diagram? What happens if somehow Brutus getting triggered and then he learned something and internally now his new higher functioning rules have changed?
Very good question, Doovid. Now, for this question, I'm going to have to use another diagram, but I just want to quickly mention something about this diagram here, is this idea that we have a subjective consciousness and our awareness is a proper subset of that subjective consciousness. So the way to visualize that is a sphere which kind of bends back on itself and creates another sphere on the inside of it. Now, this is three-dimensional quantum mechanics, spherical quantum mechanics. It does take a bit of a time to get used to thinking this way, but what's happening is the mind is folding on itself. And the reason we can tell that it's folding on itself is because we're able to deduce more information vis-a-vis the computations, which the computations of the mind, I know this is probably a bit of an impediment for people to understand, but remember, our minds have essentially three types of computations: thoughts, emotions, and sensations. So what happened with, or what happens when somebody goes into this sort of lower mind emotional response? So here we'll walk you through the process step by step, okay? First, we have whoever the person is, the conscious entity, and then we have some stimulus from the environment. And what that stimulus is going to do is create a dissonance between what you're expecting to perceive and what you're actually perceiving. Brutus expected me to behave a certain way on the stream. He did not observe his expectation. This difference in projection caused this dissonance effect, which we can all relate to some extent. It's this uncomfortable it's an uncomfortable vibe where you're sort of recoiling from the external world. You're just, you're not comfortable at all. You feel an impulse to lash out emotionally. So the thing you have to realize is that this is all happening in a fraction of a second, but we're just really, really slowing that down now. So what's going to happen is that the free will, the consciousness, which is this guy over here, these two instincts were in what, like, they're in this diagram, they're the same size, but you have to realize in reality that they're maybe different sizes depending on how advanced you are. So they're at their relative levels operating. And this dissonance causes the survival instinct to manifest more strongly. So that projection gets bigger. So the choice the person has to have is to say, okay, even though I'm feeling this huge emotional response, I'm going to choose to inhibit my initial reaction because I care more about truth, for which I have to be calm and open to receive. And that's the choice of what you would call free will. Most people go with the survival instinct because it's more familiar, and some people go with a truth instinct. And this is what's actually happening in the in the progression. Does that clear it up a little bit?
Well, I mean, I don't think we're gonna. I mean, I hear where you're leading on it. I would say we're not gonna solve the hard problem of consciousness in a week in review.
Well, we kind of have solved, at least we've archetypalized, or we've imposed an archetype system on the mind, which is transcendent.
Let me just clarify. I mean, a bad guy who, even though he's kind of our troll, has probably listened to more of us than almost anyone else. I think me and you have a fundamental different understanding, and in classical terms, is saying I'm basically a dualist, where you're a monist, and that I think that there's a spiritual world, and that the quantum mind is true. However, the quantum mind is the method that the spiritual realm. So I agree with your kind of like quantum periodic table is the source of truth of the material realm, but I believe that there's a spiritual realm and there's different forces that communicate through the material realm. And it would appear that you're more a monist, where you don't believe that there's some sort of parallel spiritual realm that is.
I do believe there's a spiritual realm. What happens is when this subjective consciousness loses the physical body, i.e., when you die, the subjective consciousness returns to the universal quantum computer. And since the physical realm is a subset of the universal quantum computer, the consciousness, which is not within the disembodied consciousness, can still affect what happens in the physical world by affecting the subjective consciousness of the people inside the physical world. So I'm not sure if that's the same as you. My view doesn't necessitate a God that is consciously acting on the universe, though.
Well, if you define the word God in somewhat the humility to say, in our current state, our understanding of the spiritual world is less than our ability to understand the material world. So when you say God is the quantum periodic table, you're saying that only explains the workings of the material realm and possibly how the spiritual realm interacts with the material realm. However, the quantum periodic table will not explain how the spiritual realm operates.
It won't fully parameterize it, but the spiritual realm comes about from the physical realm because the consciousness is created by the physical world. And so the ultimate source of consciousness is the physical world. However, that doesn't necessarily mean we can predict all the workings of the what you would call metaphysical world, i.e. the domain of consciousness. That doesn't mean that we can use purely physical laws to predict the outcome of consciousness, because it is its own domain. And it's significantly larger than the physical world, but every experience inside of it is tinged with the subjective experience. So
we've been in these circles a few times, but just for the people watching to get a clarification of these ideas, where I'm leaning in the opposite direction, where I'm saying that the material realm is a manifestation of consciousness, as where you're saying consciousness is a manifestation of the material realm. And that's kind of, we've talked about that of like Bergson in the holographic mind, and to try to understand what I'm saying when I say the material realm is a manifestation of the spiritual realm, and consciousness is not a physical property. Consciousness is a spiritual property, but it's manifested through the quantum mind in the material realm, where you seem to be leaning in the opposite direction.
I'm basically saying, and I'll pull up an article that clarifies it a little bit more, that the potential for what we experience as consciousness is built into the fabric of the physical universe. That's what I would say in short, and it all comes down to solving the...
Hamerov has different perspectives, and he notes that the possibilities, does this consciousness predate the creation, or does consciousness enter at some time? And he has kind of a Big Bang understanding, and he's got the different levels on my stream, the pre-stream to our stream. I haven't used Hamerov's exact PowerPoints that he has on his webpage, where he has the different points in his belief of the evolutionary history of the world where consciousness may have entered, and or there could be levels, and he recognizes that possibly some level of consciousness predated the creation of the material world. And obviously I don't think either me or you are really believers in the Big Bang to agree with Hamerov on that aspect. And then he says, we evolved in order to kind of nurse this consciousness that permeate, the consciousness always permeated the universe, and that humans, animals, single cells evolved in a way to kind of like nurse or tap into the power of consciousness that was previously there, as opposed to the other concept where consciousness is a unique creation of the brain, and that had it not been for the brain, consciousness wouldn't exist. As opposed to looking at the brain as a machine that's harnessing the power of consciousness that's already there. The brain does not create consciousness. The brain harnesses a power that is pre-existent in the universe, had the brain been there or not.
I believe the quote from Dr. Hammeroff was that he believes the universe is proto-conscious. And so I suppose that would be consistent with my worldview, that the potential for consciousness is simply a result of the fact that the entire universe is itself a series of measurements that manifest as space-time events. And so that's where the quantum periodic table comes in, that space-time on the microcanonical scale is literally measuring the fact that we have 3 dimensions. And we don't actually understand dimensions very well because we only have our 3-dimensional worldview where the dimensions are perpendicular to each other. They're more or less independent, whereas you can see on this scale that they're not independent, they're maximally dependent. But we still have this same idea of there being 3 dimensions plus 1, because there's 1 and then 2 and then 3. You can see how there's only really 3 patterns, because this pattern and this pattern is the same. And so the main point of this teaching is to convince people that the universe is essentially wave-like, not particle-like. And currently in quantum mechanics, what they say is that quantum potentials have both a particle and a wave-like manifestation. And basically what I'm saying is that the wave-like manifestation is the primary motivator, and the particle-like manifestation is much further down the line, when things start to collapse on themselves in every single dimension, and all the dimensionality, the potential for manifestation of dimensionality collapses maximally, because all these waveforms become binded to what you'd call a maximum entropy state. So they become a standing wave. And that's where you can have a situation where things appear to be solid, but can still be made to, if we look at the example of somebody singing at a very high frequency, shattering a wine glass, even though it was solid, it can still be reduced to sort of pulverized through the power of vibration. Not sure if you had any comments on that, because I think we do have essentially different understanding of these things, but it could also be romantic to an extent, because I think it maybe comes down to a question of where does consciousness actually start versus how does consciousness actually work. And how we parameterize consciousness is ultimately going to give us, like, the axioms essentially are everything. So what you assume to be true from the get-go in many ways determines what is eventually observed as true.
That's why everybody has consciousness and a brain and thought, so we could have an intuition. So there's the direction of scientific research and ideas that are very limited. Like, as we discussed last week, Avogadro's number might just mean that we're never going to solve the hard problem of consciousness, that you just can't get from the micro to the macro level, because it's just beyond calculation. However, our intuition of how the solution is going to pan out, or just whether it's your psychic or however you describe your somewhat intuitive understanding how things work, even though you couldn't scientifically work it out. And as we discussed last week, Avogadro's number is 10 to the 23rd. So it could just be impossible to have a working theory of consciousness that goes from the micro to the macro. So my intuitions don't really matter. It's like, okay, I'm a dualist. That's kind of the way I feel and perceive the world in my studies and the masters of different people that I've read and respected their opinion. But basically I'm searching for truth, and I'm willing to recognize my intuition could be wrong. But it's like Descartes, and I think therefore I am. So when you explain consciousness to me, it should match my consciousness, because you're explaining something that even people watching that have almost no background in physics or mathematics, you're explaining something that they have. It's like telling them anatomy. So it should make an intuitive sense that the mechanism that each person watching this is currently going through somehow fits according to the explanation you're giving.
Yeah, I really hope so. It's an ongoing conversation, and I hopefully it'll go in a positive direction very soon.
Yeah, but it pays to think about it. I mean, they're just like to contemplate on the. I mean, I assume people know Avogadro's number, took high school chemistry, and like the mole, where you have like a gram. If you have how many atoms of something does it take to have like a sizable amount to gram? And so Avogadro, the famous chemist, says it's like 6.022 times 10 to the 23rd. And if anyone has done basic chemistry calculations or physics, like I had that memorized. I didn't even have to look it up because I've done some of those calculations. So if you're taking biochemistry or you're looking at the atomic model, and you're trying to just explain the electron patterns of one atom, or the fluctuations on the quantum scale of one single atom, and then you want to explain in the brain, you're talking about 10 to the 20 some of those atoms just in one cell. So it's it's almost say that you could make an argument that the hard problem of consciousness is literally unsolvable. There is no way to have a working system that will get you all the way from the micro to the macro.
Sure, but in traditional debate, you can't really assert a negative, no matter how promising it may seem. So if someone wants to deny a theory, they usually have to present an alternate theory that is in some way better, because the negation hypothesis, we don't usually go that route. But I mean, you could attempt to go that route. I don't know where it ends exactly, because you have to accept some authority as regards the nature of consciousness.
Well, there's mathematical. I mean, for example, the claim that chess is unsolvable because the number of possible different positions is going to be like 10 to the 72nd, and that's actually more than the number of atoms in the universe. So the sense that you could even create a computer, what does it mean to compute? What would it mean for something to be able to produce every single possible chess position? And so there's been mathematical proofs that have, so to say, proved that chess is unsolvable, and that even a quantum computer, the most powerful computer, will never have the ability to look at every single possible chess position. But I mean, it doesn't mean, obviously chess computers are the best in the world. You could get on your cell phone a program that will beat the world champion chess player. So I'm not saying, the hard problem of consciousness, just looking at it like Avogadro's number is big. And if you're looking at like, does consciousness arrive from the cells, from the atoms, and to make a proof that you could never conclusively give a theory of how consciousness arises just due to the complexity of the brain, of the human mechanism, doesn't mean you can't understand substantial things about consciousness. We could understand countless things about consciousness, how it works, how it arises. We could deduce multiple mechanisms, like I did on my series, where there's many of the sense perception in the higher level rules, where there is reasonable brain studies that show how these higher level rules, areas in the brain light up when higher level rules are working, and sense perception is relatively well understood, and motor control is relatively well understood, even though you couldn't necessarily give a neuron by neuron explanation or an atom by atom explanation. We know that when you move something, like you move a muscle, we could basically give a complete description of the physical mechanism for like the neuron that lights up, and for that going through the body to the muscle contraction that causes movement or something like that. So I didn't mean to be like a nihilist or something, just saying, because Avogadro's number is so complex that we could never solve the hard problem of consciousness, means that all research on the field is pointless. Wasn't the point I was trying to make. I was just saying that you're trying to appreciate the complexity of the problem we're trying to solve.
Sure. And I guess I don't really feel like it's been successfully solved, largely because of beliefs like this, that people are axiomatically believing that it is unsolvable. So if you have that belief from the get-go, I don't really know how you're going to solve it if you already decided that you can't.
it was like Jordan Peterson, where Jordan Peterson, you'll never solve it, hence therefore surrender to Jesus, or something like that, where if a person has, you're saying, okay, in theory, I'm searching for truth, and I'm not trying to, I'm encouraging people to study these things. I just want people to appreciate how big of a task it is, and even though there's thousands, maybe tens of thousands of the greatest minds all over the world trying to solve it, why we're still so far away from a solution, as opposed to maybe like a fake guru or type person who's like, accept my path, I have the truth, and all this science will never answer it, therefore you should just accept my dogmatic truth. Like when we had the stream on Gödel's incompleteness theorem, where Jordan Peterson, in both of our opinions, although I largely agreed with Gödel's incompleteness theorem's conclusion, we both agreed that Jordan Peterson was misusing the theory.
Well, it's this issue with asserting a negative. It doesn't really provide any information. His position was basically, because the Gödel theorem is true, therefore God is the source of truth. And that just seems a bit absurd to me. So, it's a false assumption, which then makes false predictions, which then unfortunately weakens the strength of the position, because it's basically saying, it just seems like he's sort of contorting his mind to try to, quote, prove that God exists. And I'm just not sure that works. It doesn't appear to be really working.
That wasn't all. What I'm just saying, like this diagram that you have showing, just that in our brain, there's like 10 to the 25th of these. Then it's an unfathomable large number of, so you just to understand the mechanisms in this diagram that you're showing for, one state of one atom, and then, to recognize that the human brain has like, 10 with 25 zeros after of these things in our brain.
But at the same time, the periodic table is only so complex. It only has 118 elements, and those elements themselves turn out to just be particular manifestations of the measurement limit, which itself only has 3 plus 1. So at the end of the day, the periodic table establishes that there is a finite complexity. The universe is infinite, and in that sense, it's infinitely complex, but its underlying laws they're super complicated, don't get me wrong, but you can see in this diagram, this is all that exists, in the sense of every single massive element is included in this one diagram, because it's a three-dimensional it's a two-dimensional representation of the three-dimensional periodic table. And so we can get this instinct that things are only so complex. And after many years, we can understand not the full totality, but we can understand the complexity. And that is so important, because once we understand the complexity, we realize that humans are also only so complex. For example, we can prove how big the universe is in terms of energy. And we estimate the size of the universe by checking to see what the size of a proton is, all the way to the size of the largest interstellar distance in the entire universe. And so that would be all of the different possible physical orders. And you have to raise that size, like you're basically raising it to the power of, it's like, okay, how can I explain this? It's a logarithmic scale, right? So each time it's times 10. So the length, I take the length of a proton and I multiply that by 10 for a certain number of times, and eventually I get the largest interstellar distance, and this number ends up being 42. And so since we also know that particular manifestations always happen on a three-dimensional scale, because we always have this collapse back to some type of three-dimensional configurations, we want to divide that 42 by 3, which then gives us 14. So we have this idea of 14 energetic dimensions precipitated by the physical universe. And it is within those 14 dimensions that our minds become projected, because you can think of the mind as a superposition of different frequency projections. Now you're saying we can never know we can never know the nature of these frequency projections. And I'm saying we may not need to know. because we can get sufficiently close that we'll understand part of it, and the part we can't understand because it's too complex and there's too much information there for us to parse through, maybe that part isn't as important as we think if we just start with the aspect that we can understand, i.e. the parameterization of consciousness that everybody agrees on. That's why I put out those different diagrams showing different ways of parameterizing the consciousness so that people can read through them and then maybe pick which one they like the most. And then we can develop that one together to go even deeper into how thoughts are formed. Because how are we supposed to understand the nature of thoughts given this impediment of this quantum nature of consciousness?
Yeah, maybe sometime over the next few weeks. I mean, we were speaking offline about, kind of where I got tapped out in majoring in physics, where I got to senior level physics, and then we had Lagrangian and Hamiltonians and conformal mappings, and there's so many mathematical tools that attempt to deal with calculating these things that are largely incalculable, and dealing with infinities and different things where you could like Fourier series and Fourier transforms, and there's so many different brilliant mathematical tools that have been created to try to work with these impossibilities. And the coordinate systems, like I mentioned, the Hamiltonians and Lagrangians, where you're working with the difficulties of creating a coordinate system to deal with a physical property. And to some extent, once you properly create the coordinate system to deal with the problem, the solving of the problem isn't that difficult, but the creation of the coordinate system in order to deal with the problem. And we know, like, the three-dimensional gravity problem has shown to be insolvable. And worth trying even to attempt the proof why three-body gravitation is actually unsolvable. However, it can be estimated with extreme precision. Anyone who's took calculus, and you have like the Kramer, Runge-Cuddy, and the Euler, all these different estimation methods that, even though mathematically it's been demonstrated that you can't actually solve these problems in a formal way to have an equation that's an exact solution, there's lots of different methods that will put you towards a very precise estimation of the correct solution. And so mathematically, like the quantum mind, how do you get from the micro to a macro? You have to understand these complicated mathematical techniques that the scientists use to do that.
Yes, precisely. And this is, you just said something that is so true, that you get so close to the solution by properly parameterizing the problem. And the issue they've run into with physics is that they are assuming that calculus can be done on the micro level when it should be very clear that it cannot. So what is calculus? I mean, to me, you need to have lines be properly defined for calculus to make sense. For a function to be differentiable, it needs to be continuous. Are you familiar with this idea?
Well, yeah.
Sure. So they're trying to solve these field equations using calculus because the Hamiltonian, that's calculus. It's an operator, which is a calculus, which is a tensor.
Maybe sometime over the next few weeks to do a separate, not a week in review, but a whole separate stream on, maybe an overview of the different mathematical techniques that are used to, try to measure and estimate how the workings of the physical world.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we can prove to ourselves that calculus can't work on this fine scale in any physical manner. It may work.
I mentioned that a few weeks ago, that probably, so to say, to solve the hard problem of consciousness, a new mathematics would need to be created, probably in line or even greater than the creation of calculus, where Newton, in essence, created the calculus in order to explain in a mathematical language his understanding of the connection between position, velocity, acceleration, and time, that that he had intuited that there's this relationship between position, velocity, and acceleration based on time, and created the calculus to explain it. That calculus is just the best tool that we have at our disposal to work with, to explain these physical processes and how they're related to each other. But it would probably take the creation of some sort of new improved calculus to actually be able to solve the hard problem of consciousness.
There's also the issue of presenting it in a way that people are actually able to use it. Because, I mean, it seems like you actually were pretty good at calculus, but even in spite of that, you eventually hit a ceiling where you weren't able to apply it anymore. And if you can't apply it, well, I struggle to see the value of it, because if you can't do it, well, who can?
Well, there were some people in the program. Yeah, I was at the University of Michigan, a good physics program, and when you start looking at complicated systems and want to derive the equations to explain them, I really couldn't do it. I mean, you have to be, even I understood what Hamilton and Lagrangian mechanics was trying to do. I just couldn't successfully do it. And like, I remember a final exam, and it's like, if you a pendulum attached to a pendulum or something like that, which wasn't super complicated, and to derive the formula, or even like a curveball, can you derive the formula for a curveball? And it's like, well, we all have cars or drive cars, or have computers and are using complicated gadgets, and we have no clue how they work. And I just wasn't that good with the mathematics where you could show me a physical phenomenon in even like celestial motion, or something that aren't super complicated. Like Israel was supposed to have that lunar mission land on the moon, and I did calculations like that, just undergraduate physics. I'm sure you have a degree in physics. I'm sure you had tests and homework problems where you had to largely work out, like how do you get a satellite from Earth to the moon, and you got to break the escape velocity, cycle it around the Earth a few times, and then let it loose until it catches the gravity of the moon. And Israel, the top scientists, they crashed their moon landing. They got it all the way to the moon, and but at the last minute it crashed on the moon, and they couldn't quite get it to work right. So it's saying, but just on paper, let alone being able to design a satellite that lands on the moon, just in an academic setting where you're asked to create those equations, it's pretty difficult. And you're saying, like, I was good with calculus, and like I could do simple calculus like predator-prey models, or basic physics, or even three-dimensional physics of shapes and geometry and different things. But when it comes to something useful, like can you create an engine? Can you make a satellite that gets to the moon or something like that? Those are very, very difficult calculations, and it requires great minds that are just precise and could really work out these numbers right. And I don't know if you were that good with calculus, or you just kind of understood the theory of calculus, you could do basic problems, or do you have like a precision ability to just write these equations out and be precise about it?
Well, I was a tutor for a long time. I started when I was about 15.
I was a tutor also. I'm saying, like, for physics, calculus-based physics, like calculus 1 through 4, I was a tutor for. Like, not only did I do the calculus, I was a tutor for it. But when it came to senior level physics courses in Lagrangians and Hamiltonians, that, like, I tapped out, and I didn't have a tutor. Maybe if I had someone tutored me, I would have eventually got it. But when it came to it, it was like it appeared too difficult for me, and I just switched to civil engineering.
Yeah, just to answer your question about how good I am at calculus, I would say because of the experience with the tutoring, I'm probably better than most people. But calculus is a tool which has a philosophy. And so when you study that underlying philosophy, you understand that the scope of application of calculus is not everything, because at the fine scale, you have this quantum state exclusion, which means that things are basically going from one place to another that are not physically connected because they're only energetically connected, which is what the periodic table is. Like, for example, there's no transition between hydrogen and helium. It's either hydrogen or it's helium. So the idea that you could have a calculus map that would take you from hydrogen to helium, for example, would be itself precluded by the very definition of calculus. So I never got into calculus to the extent of general relativity because I wasn't, and even quantum mechanics to some extent, because I just wasn't convinced that it was even possible to use these ideas in this domain, because they're, when they're talking about quantum mechanics, it's always talking about the micro limit, the very small limit. And so, yeah, I guess probably.
You're saying you could take out you could have a freshman in college or sophomore or high school student and do like projectile motion like all day. Like, I mean, I could do that. Like, someone's got a projectile motion problem, no problem. But when it comes down to escape velocities and putting something in orbit around the Earth, that I might also be able to do. But as it gets more complicated, eventually I'm getting tapped out at a point where I couldn't continue to make those calculations.
Well, in school, they'll usually give you the formula, and then you have to kind of play around with the formula. And the way I look at it is, where are we actually getting the formula from? And so, yeah, I guess that's more my focus. And so if there's already a formula presented, i.e. they're saying, okay, well, the escape velocity is modeled by this function, and there's all these other parameters, calculate what speed whatever the satellite has to go at to reach such and such a height, et cetera, that would just be a matter of going through the process of calculus. But actually designing formulas that predict the expected result, that's the hard part. So I wouldn't say I'm the best person in the world at that, because there's probably people out there who have spent years training in this exact domain. For example, a lot of people model economics with calculus and stuff, so they're probably much better than me at that type of calculus. But basically what I'm saying is that calculus has a limit, and that limit is evidenced by the fact that in order for so derivatives and integrals, they're kind of the foundation of calculus. And since integrals come from derivatives, because the integral is the opposite process of differentiation, it's really all down to derivatives and whether the derivative itself exists. And in order for a derivative to be well defined, you need to meet certain criteria, which is that lines are defined and that you have at least a continuous function. It in fact needs more conditions than just continuity to be differentiable. And so this limitation is the reason why calculus doesn't work for quantum mechanics, and literally cannot work. It could only work as a metaphorical representation of, for example, a tensor, which is saying, like in the Hamiltonian, when we do these operations, certain things are conserved. We have a total energy function, which is in some sense conserved. So this is basically, I don't know, that's about the limit of what I can put into words at this time. I'm not sure if that's helped clear things up or not. And I'm also at a bit of a loss as to where to send people who are interested in understanding the actual philosophy of calculus, because that's not usually how it works. It's usually just learn these things, learn these algorithms, do these questions, and over that process, over time, you'll understand what calculus actually is.
I'd mentioned to JF after our debate on vegetarianism after the show, I spoke to him a few minutes after, and I was talking about trying to model, slightly different variation. I was reading today, book on the history of India and Max Mueller, and you had your big show last night on another Aryan invasion theory, rebuttal. And, so Max Mueller basically tried to understand the history of India through the interactions of different races of people, that the main thing that caused change was, when different people started to interact with each other. And he comes up with, his theory of the Aryan invasion theory, that that it was the Aryans that eventually came into India, and that effect of dealing with that people was the precursor to the creation of Vedic culture, which has been widely discredited and is almost certainly not historically accurate, but just for the thought process that Mueller and the developers of the Aryan invasion theory went through, you could understand the way they thought about it, and that they kind of had this single dynamic understanding of what caused the progression of mankind, and it was like a racial human biodiversity when different peoples met for the first time and influenced each other, and which cultures dominated, and that someone I forget someone had made a JF video, I forget who did it, trying to show like his genetic theories, but they had like really good computer visuals with like color dots and population movements. And if you could have a computer model, that would be based on some sort of differential equations that would show the migrations, origins of people, what happened when the different peoples interacted, and that would just be the interaction of people, let alone other factors like economic ideas, trade, geographic, weather, all these religious different factors that are competing with each other to influence the course of history at the same time. And you see differential equations is really a powerful tool, probably necessary to understand this concept where you have the rate of change, you have different factors that all are influencing what's happening, and they might be going up and down with different rates of change, and those rates of change are connected to each other. That as one rate of change goes up and down, that changes the rates of other things. And
yeah, the idea here is this is where calculus actually does apply, is when you have such large numbers that you can converge to an approximately continuous distribution of measurements.
You're right. I mean, just to finish my point, that with the JF and who is claiming like multiculturalism, our debate on multiculturalism is, could you reduce our debate to a predator-prey model of differential equations, where you could model, his theory that it's going to be predator-prey, and one multiculturalism is bad because one side wins and one side loses. And if you know the predator-prey models, that's not necessarily the case. There's equilibriums at different points, and it doesn't have to be that one side goes to dominance and the other side goes to zero. There's many cases of equilibriums at different points, and population shifts could find different comfortable equilibriums.
You could model it as predator-prey, but again, you'd need to know like what's the definition? First of all, that's the most important part. What are the definitions of these words? And secondly, how do you model these tendencies? So you could say that because governments function essentially as eugenic programs through currency or through wealth redistribution, you could look at that as an engine for predation. And so the people who are the net consumers from the state would be the predators, and then the net people who pay into the state would be the prey. That would be one way you could do it, but I know it's probably significantly more complicated than just that. So maybe, but you'd need to be able to actually, you'd need to define your axioms in such a way that they were convincing. And this is where I think people are going to get tripped up, because they don't spend enough time on the axioms. Even JF's axioms are quite, he's not a stupid person, that's for sure. He's put a lot of thought into it, but I would say he should have spent more time on his axioms rather than just proffer this idea, which is sort of a magic key, this idea of a phenotypic revolution. I'm not sure how much you've looked into his theories per se, or if you've seen his book yet.
I read the first chapter. I mean, I was too cheap to pay full price for his book, so when the price goes down, I'll probably get it. But I did like, I did agree with some of the fundamental, tenets, and like, I'm not a believer in evolution per se, but I did appreciate that, he might have actually unique thoughts that if you did believe in the evolutionary theory, where you could actually be advancing an understanding of evolution. So like, I do appreciate his research, and I think he we talked about this, and it was, he agreed that it might be possible to try to reduce, like our arguments into, somewhat a series of differential equations that would be able to model it, but neither me or him were capable of doing that. And maybe you're saying that the calculus is essentially a flawed tool. So it's, the calculus, you wouldn't be able to reduce these arguments on like Aryan invasion theory, multiculturalism, a clash of culture into a series of differential equations. But maybe there is another mathematical tool that is yet to be discovered that would be powerful enough to model this.
Well, it's a question of axiomatic strength. So calculus only works under certain circumstances because humans are a finite number. And in order for calculus to work, you need to be able to break things down, basically chop them up into infinitely small pieces. And humans can't really be chopped up into infinitely small pieces as much as people would like to make that claim. It's not really possible in any meaningful sense.
Well, I mean, to nations. I mean, in theory, the humans would be chopped up into racial, ethnic, or genetic nations.
Right. Well, that's not what I meant, though. But I meant the actual practice of calculus. What does it mean to be doing calculus on a system? And what I'm saying is that calculus really only works in systems like what you're describing because it's the best approximation. We're always
archetypes even. I mean, if you didn't agree with racial categorization, that you could, some sort of archetype where you could break down humanity into a few enough archetypes where based on those archetypes, you could have a series of equations that would, here's your understanding of history and here's my understanding of history. And we could actually model our understanding of the progression of history with equations.
And then it would come down to the strength of the archetype model. And that would always have a huge element of subjective bias because you'd need to successfully give an archetype of all the different subgroups that you wanted. And no one's going to say there's only one archetype for group X. They're going to want sub-archetypes. And then it's going to be a process of determining what all those sub-archetypes are, arguing over them, going back and forth, etc. And then probably even at the end of the day, not getting a consensus. Because historically, even on something as relatively objective as the number of elements in the Ayurvedic tradition, which is the medical tradition, that's actually been debated for a really long time. For example, like what exactly are the doshas? The doshas I gave you, those are what are kind of considered the most predictive in a lot of schools, but there have been people throughout history who have made claims to the contrary. So the fact that there's this subjective limit to these archetype systems imposes another limitation. But if you could somehow manage to do it in an archetypal fashion, the conclusions would probably make more sense because the archetypes also make sense. So it's just a matter of getting people to a point where they believe in archetypes. And I'm not really sure if that's realistic at this point because a lot of people just believe we're all exactly the same in some sense.
Yeah, so so maybe we covered some of like the week in review of scientific advancement and kind of what we're thinking and what we're planning on being thinking about, and there's always like in order to express or understand these ideas, there's a constant study of things like mathematics where it's like, okay, if you understood the Grangians or Hamiltonian transformations or even more complicated things like conformal mappings and different mathematical techniques, that it might actually make it easier to push forward in these ideas and the complexity of the problems we're struggling with, that just the necessity to have these mathematical tools to be able to push forward on these ideas. So it's good to express. I'm glad we did that. I've probably covered basically everything. I'm not sure if you have anything else or if there's anyone else that wanted to hop on and add something.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for all your thoughts, Doovid. Really appreciate it. We have some interesting contributions in the chat. I guess we can wrap up for now, and I'll have a look at the chat comments and maybe answer some of those questions in a future stream, just because I don't want to interrupt the flow here. And it seems like you've said everything you need to say. So we'll wrap it up for now and say thanks to everyone who came by to watch. Really appreciate it. And thank you so much, Doovid, for being the co-host. Looking forward to the next time we stream together. And
Do you got plans for next week that you want to announce? Any streams you're planning this week?
I haven't been planning too many streams. I've mostly been focused on writing and writing reviews. So we'll see what happens. Maybe there'll be more developments in the Claire Ka, Jen Sharf saga. She's made a couple streams talking about me a little bit there. So who knows? Who knows? I'm sure lots of interesting things will happen, and we'll have another very interesting week in review next time we all meet up.
Okay, yeah, looking forward. Have a great week, everyone. Hopefully, push these conversations forward, push these ideas forward, create a community around ideas and positive relationships.
Bye-bye.